Hello everybody, welcome into our latest live video. Today it is Thursday, it is the 24th of October 2024. My name is CareyHolzman and today we're going to continue on with part 3 of our Minisforum AtomMan G7 PT overview and in-depth analysis regarding the storage and RAM configurations. RAM really is decided, it's really about the storage now. We've determined that RAID 0 really doesn't make any sense on this model because both NVMe slots, this comes with 2 of them, are not the same speed. So in order for you to achieve the best speed possible in a RAID 0 array, you need both drives in an ideal scenario to get the optimized benefit to be the same make, model, performance, and have the exact same limits, shall we say, on the high end and on the low end. Transfer limits, speed limits, big files, small files. That's why in order to have any consistency in optimization and efficiency, both drives need to be the same. Now, even this is true of any of a RAID configuration. It's possible to RAID different drives together or different capacities made years apart, but you're going to end up with a RAID array that is unreliable, inefficient, and you're not going to be getting the best out of it. So you might be dealing with failed drives more often if you've got a mix and match of old and new, and you won't be seeing the highest speed, but rather the lowest speed of the slowest drive holding the entire thing up. So because this has a Gen 4 slot and a Gen 5 slot, you pick one or the other. You get either Gen 5 and don't use the Gen 4, or you can use 2 Gen 4s, which are the same as 1 Gen 5 in performance. So essentially we started with NVMe with Gen 3, and we're going to make these numbers, we're going to round them and make them simple. With Gen 3, your maximum speed is 4,000, and with each generation it doubles. So with Gen 4, 8,000, Gen 5, 16,000. The reason we put something in a RAID 0 array is to double the speed. So if we put 2 Gen 4 drives in, we will achieve the speed of 1 Gen 5 drive. Why would we do that? And if we put a Gen 5 drive in and we put a Gen 4 drive in, the whole thing runs at Gen 4 speed. There's no benefit to the Gen 5 in a RAID array. On the other hand, if you don't use the RAID array and you simply have 2 individual drives, say we put a Generation 5 in the Gen 5 slot and a Generation 4 in the Gen 4 slot, and we use one for our boot drive, one for our data drive, that's perfectly acceptable. Which one should you use for your boot drive? You should always use your fastest drive for your boot drive. And so today I thought I would test that. That's why I've left this open as it was yesterday when we ended the video. I just left everything here, including the screws that we've removed. Then you'll notice in the trailer that played before this video, for those of you watching live, there is a screenshot that they show in the trailer that designates to us which slot is which, because it doesn't say. That was part of what I was going to figure out today, but I don't have to because Minisforum has their own YouTube channel. And if we look at the channel, let me bring up a screen capture of this, we can see this little diagram right here. And this diagram shows us that there's an NVMe drive that goes in horizontally and an NVMe drive that goes in vertically. The problem is Minisforum did not do any job in labeling them for us. So when I'm in there, I can't tell which is which. So presumably this is a screen capture out of their documentation, which of course I didn't look at, but it should be labeled right here where the drive plugs in, right up at the top. It should say Gen 5. Like, you don't have to label them both. If one is Gen 5 and one is Gen 4, or in this case we're calling it PCIe 5 and PCIe 4, same thing. Just label one or the other and I can figure out through deduction which is which. So in this case, when we opened up the unit in part 1, we saw the Wi-Fi card and the NVMe drive in this horizontal position are held both in place with one screw. And it requires taking the Wi-Fi card out to get that drive installed or removed. That's our Gen 5 slot. This vertical slot, at least as we've got the machine oriented in this diagram, this is our Gen 4 slot. So when you compare these together, when you put them together as a RAID 0 array, you're only getting the performance of the slowest drive, doubled, which doesn't make any sense. Why would you put a Gen 5 in here when you could put 2 Gen 4s in and achieve the same speed? On the other hand, why would you spend the money for 2 Gen 4s and take up both slots when for the same money, you could buy 1 Gen 5 and still have a free port available for data and don't use RAID at all? For that reason, on this particular machine, the RAID configuration in this regard makes no sense at all to me, at least not in regards to performance. Now, with RAID 1 mirroring, if you wanted to put 2 Gen 4 drives in and you weren't interested in performance, but you wanted a drive backup in case of failure, that would make sense if we ever see SSDs fail. They do fail, but very, very infrequently. I think we've seen 3 in total when did we start doing this? 11 years ago? In the meantime, we've probably seen about 700, 800 bad mechanical hard drives. So it's not even a comparison. Solid state drives very rarely fail. However, data backups regardless would still be required, whether RAID 1, drive failure, virus infections, accidental deletions, power outages, there's power spike. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons people lose their data. So this is not a backup and it doesn't negate backup. The only reason I could see doing this would be for performance reasons, and because they're both not the same generation, it doesn't make any sense, especially when you can just buy the latest generation, which is twice the speed of the previous, and just use 1 drive, and then you'll have a 50% less chance of a failure if you only have 1 drive that can fail. So that being said, we at least got that resolved yesterday. Now, part of today's video was to figure out which slot was which. This diagram solves that problem. So the next thing I want to do is I want to reinstall Windows 11 again today, removing the RAID array, but just strictly putting 2 PCIe Gen 5 drives in both slots. So this PCIe Gen 5 NVMe in this slot should run twice as fast as the same NVMe drive plugged in this slot, which is going to be limited by the Gen 4 speed of the slot. Okay, so it wouldn't make sense for us to spend the extra money for a Gen 5 drive and then plug it into a computer that's going to run it at Gen 4 speeds when we could buy a Gen 4 drive for half the money. I hope that's clear. I try to think of an analogy for this, but effectively, you can buy the fastest USB drive on the market, but if your computer is still on the USB 2, you're limited by the speed of that USB port you're plugging into, not by the device. Everything that plugs in together on a computer must all run at the same speed in order to achieve that speed. And that speed will ultimately be the slowest speed amongst everything in the chain. So if part of the chain is you've got a drive that's connected to a cable, and the drive is USB 3, but the cable is USB 2, but the plug you're plugging it into is USB 3, you're only going to run at USB 2 speeds. No matter how you shift this around, the lowest number in the chain will be the limiting factor of the entire throughput of data in that chain. That's how computers work. It's how they've always worked. So if you want fast speeds, you spend more money. You spend more money on the cable, you spend more money on the port, you spend more money on the device, and you get more speed, you get better performance. That is the world of performance. This is true in cars, it's true in life, and it's true with computers. Now, let me go back over to, where was I? Camera 1 right here, and say hello to everybody joining us in the chat. Boy, I just started off today getting right to business. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, Intel released their, well, supposedly released their new 15th gen processors, the Core Ultra line. The Core Ultra 9, so far as I can tell, never was released. Either that, or they released very few of them and they've already sold out long before they've ever been made available for sale. I'm not sure how that happens. The Ultra 7 is available on Amazon for $409, a little over MSRP. They're squeezing more money out of you because they can. If people don't buy it, the price will come down. We've ordered the Ultra 7, and we have a motherboard coming probably next week. And we will build the Core Ultra 7. The Ultra 9 financially doesn't make any sense. Well, that was our intention to buy one anyway for the content. To spend $200 more to get 12% in return. The Ultra 7 is a much better value-oriented deal. Gamers Nexus did an excellent video today explaining that Intel has once again dropped the ball with regards to communicating with the motherboard vendors. And the Cliff's notes on this are simply that motherboard vendors were cranking the voltage up to infinity, which everybody online was stating, any content creator was stating, this is not sustainable over time. You're going to damage the chip, reduce the life of the chip. And Intel was insisting there's nothing wrong, and now Intel's reversed on that and said, okay, we need to limit the voltage on the chip. And then they had difficulty communicating that to the motherboard manufacturers. Now, if you have an Intel 12th, 13th, or 14th gen motherboard, I strongly advise you, whether you think you need it or not, to get the latest update, or make sure you have the latest BIOS update for your motherboard. We have lots of videos here to show you how to do it. It's very simple, and this will protect the longevity, stability, reliability of your investment of your Intel chip. So you say, well, they're not going to make that same mistake again, right? So we always know with the first generation product, always, there's going to be problems. Always. If you want to be first, thank you. Thank you for being a pioneer, because it's the pioneers who are the ones that get the arrows in their backs. That makes it easier for the rest of us when we go second. So once again, whatever department is responsible at Intel for communicating with the motherboard vendors has again dropped the ball and is not ensuring or looking out for their customers' experience. So when Intel's department, whatever department that is, that communicates and enforces the rules to the board partners that make boards for the Intel chips, what Intel's really doing, what they're supposed to be doing, is looking out for you and me to ensure that we have a good experience with their product. Instead, they're on a completely different page than the motherboard vendors again. They're stating things that are simply not true, and they're stating them as though they are guaranteed fact, and then they're eating crow when they admit, check your facts. Come to find out, Intel was completely wrong. You can talk confidently all day long. That doesn't change the reality. I can tell you I've got $1 million in the bank, and I can say it very confidently, but that does not put $1 million in my bank. If it did, I'd have $1 million in the bank. It's a little harder than that. So whoever in whatever that whole department, in my opinion, that whole thing needs to be gutted and reset. You've got some toxic people in there that, in my opinion, now that this is the second or third time in a row they've done this, I don't think there's any fixing it. Just wipe them all, start again. Get a fresh crew in there. They're talking about turning a feature on in BIOS that doesn't exist, that a feature's been renamed. Oh, oopsie. Oh, and that a feature will be turned on by default, guaranteed. And it is not enabled by default. So the motherboard manufacturers have once again failed the consumer in the sense that if you're building a computer and you're a first-time builder, or even if you're a builder like me, you should not have to go into the BIOS and make any changes from the default settings. Leave it alone. I keep telling you guys, it's already set by the factory. Leave it alone. Now, this doesn't apply to Dell and HP and other system manufacturers. This is about people that build our own systems. This doesn't apply to mini PCs and laptops. This is about you going and buying a motherboard. That BIOS should not be overvolting your chip. It should not be overclocking your chip, not by default. Those should be options that those knowledgeable enough to know how to use those options would be knowledgeable and comfortable enough to go into a BIOS. Your average computer person that builds a computer has no idea what any of this means. They're trusting that out of the box is the ideal optimized configuration. This has been the standard set since day one of the original IBM microcomputer. It's never changed until Intel changed it on the 13th gen. Then Intel says, we didn't do it, the motherboard makers did it. The motherboard makers say, no, Intel told us to do it this way, or they said it was okay, and then took it quite literally and just set it to no limits. So this screwed a bunch of the consumers. Screwed them on 13th and 14th gen chips. So now, right out of the gate, on day one, Intel is already on a different page than the motherboard manufacturers with regards to what features are supposed to be on guaranteed, and they're not, and what those features are called, and those names have changed. And Intel's saying one thing, and the board manufacturers are saying something else. Not a good start. This is not Intel's first time with a new chip. Something's happening at Intel where they seem to have lost touch. I was quite hopeful that Pat Gelsinger, the CEO, who rose up as CEO as an engineer, would straighten this company out. But he seems to have lost all of his engineering capabilities, and he's become a bureaucrat who can't tell left from right. He doesn't seem to understand the purpose of Intel's fabs. They have a great value, and he doesn't seem to wrap his mind around it. He acts like they're a burden. He's an engineer, for crying out loud. That's insane to me. They're trying to get nodes smaller and smaller and smaller to compete with TSMC, but that's not how you do it. Let TSMC make the small nodes. Let Intel make everything else and do it cheaper. You know, the chips that your cars use and your refrigerators and stoves, Intel has a history of making far more money from that stuff than CPUs. So will CPUs and graphics cards and things like that, those are going to require smaller and smaller nodes going forward. You'll get there, Intel, but in the meantime, use what you have and undercut them on price the same way Jeff Bezos undercut everybody on price until he put them out of business, and then he raised the prices back up. And you tell your investors you're going to lose a little bit of money, just like Bezos did. You're going to lose money. If you're investing with us, this is our long-term plan. In order for us to be competitive in the market, make it here in the United States, we need to have more competitive pricing to drive our customers to us who don't need that smaller node, and let's get our fabs busy and backlogged the same way TSMC are. And if it's costing us money to make the chips, so be it. We're building a business. We're not just in business this year. We're going to be in business 20, 30, 40 years from now. We want to make sure that we've established this the same way Bezos did. And any investor that's not ready to go with this with us on this ride, get lost. And that'll make room for other investors to come in. And many investors today, they just want to double their money in 6 minutes. You need a long-term investor who's willing to make 100 times more than whatever they invested by waiting. That's what the original Amazon investors did. Those who didn't walk away from it. They made more money than you can possibly imagine. Today's investors, by and far, want to get in and get out as quickly as possible. And it leaves a wake of destruction in their path. People lose their jobs. And it seems like the most basic information that you would think Pat Gelsinger as an engineer would have would be logic. And somehow he's gotten spun around with all of the bureaucracy that he seems dizzy now. And he can't, his logic's gone. I hope he either wakes up from his dizzy spell or he gets replaced before it's too late. After the 13th and 14th gen mess up, Intel cannot afford this to be happening right now on launch day. There's always going to be problems on a first gen product, but they shouldn't be communication problems between Intel and their board partners. And the fact that this is now the third generation in a row that has these issues, it's time, in my opinion, to relieve that department and either create another department, inject it as part of a department that already exists, or just reset it, restaff it from the get-go, and get qualified people in. Well, Intel has been laying off people left and right. I can't help but wonder, why do these people have jobs? I can't help but wonder, did they lay off the people that actually knew what they were doing? Because in my experience, that's what I witnessed when I worked at Intel. And they hold on to the people that know how to play the game but don't actually get anything done. I don't know. And I don't know these people, but I can tell you, just from clear logic of what we're seeing, there's one explanation for this. And it's the same explanation on the 13th gen, the 14th gen, and the 15th gen. That is poor communication and understanding on behalf of the department that represents you, the customer, to make sure that you have a quality experience with their product by making sure the board partners are all on the same page, verifying it before you release it to the public. You should not have a member of the public have to bring this to your attention. That's supposed to be your job. And if you can't do that job, let's bring in somebody else who can. In the meantime, it's not a massive disaster in the sense that, hey, if you get one of these boards and you get the new Ultra chip, there will be a BIOS update that fixes this, right? It's not causing any damage, but your chip is not going to perform well until you set the BIOS up correctly. That's how it should come out of the box, and how Intel could miss such a very basic quality control check and release it to the public and let the public make them aware of it is a massive embarrassment. This company is how old? They've done this how many times? Have they released chips? They've never done this before. And yet 3 years in a row now they've done it. Never before has Intel done this. So who's ever in charge of that part of the company, whatever that whole department and management, they got to go. Or everybody's going to go because you're not going to have a company anymore. So, you know, you cut off the limb and save the body. Anyway, that's my opinion. Now, when we get the Ultra 7 and the motherboard, we'll verify if these settings are in fact set by default and what they're called, and see if it aligns with the report from Gamers Nexus video earlier today. It's got me fired up. As I said, I expect there to be issues on a Gen 1 product. I mean, this is Gen 15, but it's really a first gen product, but not something as simple as a communication issue between the manufacturer of the chip and the manufacturer of the board. That's not after what just happened. Like, that should be the one thing they didn't screw up. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. The incompetence level here is beyond my ability to describe it. It is really, really bad. So hopefully the product is good. We'll find out. Didn't see that one coming. That was the last thing. Oh, they wouldn't do that a third time in a row. Oh, yes, they will. So those of you who think I'm an Intel fanboy, I'm a fan of whatever makes me profit, makes me look good to my customers. If Intel's going to embarrass me, if AMD's going to embarrass me, I don't know what else to do other than stick with mini PCs and machines that don't have these issues, or get out of the business. Because if I have to defend the products I'm selling when I have no control over their quality, I don't want to be associated with them. That would completely damage my integrity, and I'd rather not be in business if that's the case. So hopefully there won't be a fourth time in a row that Intel screws up like this. Time will tell. Somebody's got to learn their lesson eventually, right? That's just insane. Absolutely insane to me. Let's just make the same mistake again for the third time in a row, okay? What mistake was that? Exactly. You didn't learn anything. Yeah, I'm not impressed. But again, thanks to Gamers Nexus, Intel knows now. Maybe Intel should be hiring Gamers Nexus to beta test for them before they go public next time, or get somebody of reasonable experience and knowledge to do that job, which is who I thought they hired to begin with. Fooled me. Let's say hello to everybody. There's Michael Sayers and Tony's RC saying hello. Dustin Fuller joining us. And of course, Mara's in our chat room, along with David Graham and Scott. Rick Lake says hello. Doman 2000 and David Walker. Luke Greenia says hello from a breezy but sunny Vermont. Ron Barnish says hello. Welcome in, Ron. Mark Gaines saying hello, and Michael LaBelle says hello. 3D Everything and Essential Working Too Hard saying hello. John Paul Bacon, Dan Nilsson, Dave Batt, Terry, all saying hello. There's Planet Cryos with a $2 super chat, says, is there a manual? A manual for this? It's downloading. It doesn't come with one in the sense that you'd have to go to Minisforum support site and download the PDF file, which I never do. Today I was just gonna put the drives in and test it. I don't really trust manuals. I don't trust their accuracy, and I don't trust they're often translated from a different language. So I would rather, in the span of time it takes me to download and find the page, if the page exists in the manual, I could just do it and be done with it and know for a fact. So my preference is experience. The assumption the manuals you're reading will have the information you want, that information will be in the manual and not omitted, and that the information will be understandable. That's not my default. In my experience, I remember reading on how to fix a car like a Haynes repair manual, and it said remove the left nut torque converter bolt from the bell housing. That was step one. But didn't explain what side of the car is the left side. What's a torque converter bolt? What does it even look like? What's a bell housing? Like, if I already knew all this, why would I be reading the manual? And I remember having no clue from left or right, what's a torque converter bolt look like? What is a bell housing like? This is supposed to be a repair manual, but if I already knew all this, I'd already know how to do the repair. I wouldn't need the manual. So I remember thinking to myself, I'll just turn the page and I'll just do the installation in reverse. But I knew I was in trouble when I turned the page and there was one step for the installation. And it said, and I swear to you, it said, installation is opposite of removal. If you want to know what my PTSD is with manuals, it's working on cars with Chilton and Haynes repair manuals in the 1980s, and it's dealing with computers with poorly translated foreign language instructions that often say things like never press twice flexible. What does that even mean? So I value experience over anything that's written. And if I can prove to you that experience and give you that experience by vicariously or virtually having you share the experience with me, we can write the manuals. People forget the manuals didn't fall out of the sky by God himself. They were written by somebody. And anybody who does translation can't just translate a manual. That's not like translating a book. If you're going to translate architectural, medical, electrical, engineering, you need a degree in those fields along with being multilingual so that your translation makes sense. It's not enough to translate literal word for word or you end up with just a word salad. You need to have an understanding in the field for which you're translating on top of being multilingual or at least bilingual to be able to translate the meaning of the idea that's being conveyed. And all too often, with all the dollar saving and cost cutting measures, we end up getting somebody that does a literal translation like Google Translate. If you want to see an example of that, take the lyrics to your favorite song. Just Google lyrics to your favorite song, put them in Google Translate, and then translate them to any language of your choice. Then take that translation, copy that, using Google Translate. I want you to translate that back into English, and you let me know if you get the same lyrics. Try it. It's hours of entertainment. You have to understand the inference of what's being said, and in the case of technical, like I said, engineering, architecture, even legal, you have to understand to a greater degree than just simply translation. But in addition to that, you also have to understand how to translate that properly. It is not a literal word-for-word translation. So, in any event, manuals are fine. If you're a manual person and you like reading manuals, don't let me get in your way. I find them more often than not to be a complete and utter waste of my time unless I'm writing the manual. And when I write a manual, I'm going to be very clear about it. It takes a long time to write a good manual. I have a book that I wrote in this vein called The Healthy PC, and that was published about maintaining Windows 98, Windows 98 second edition, and I think Windows Millennium, and was to return control back to the users. Because when I was talking to my customers, what I'd hear over and over again is, can you recommend a book to me? But not the For Dummies books, because I've read those and they don't make any sense either. I mean, I must be a real dummy if I don't understand a For Dummies book. And the first thing that offended me was, because you don't understand the book isn't your failure, it's the author's failure. So to insult yourself, for you to say, I must be a big dummy because the dummies books, which are supposed to be for dummies, go over my head, so I must be even dumber than a dummy. Wrong, 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 wrong. That is a failure on behalf of the author. So when I wrote my book, I wrote it in a way that I could hand it to my mother and she could understand it using plain English. Quite often I'd get into arguments with my technical editor who wanted to overcomplicate little details that I said, this is where you lose the average person. They don't need this level of detail. We are not trying to turn them into technicians. They just need to understand the scope. We've got a lot to cover in the book. And if we go the way my technical editor wanted to go, the book would have been this thick. Now, how are you going to sell a book that claims to be, this is super easy, the easiest document you'll ever read, and have the document be this big? No one's going to believe that there's anything easy in that. If it's that thick, it's not easy. So I said, we have to cut the page count down. We have to limit. We're not turning people into techs. They're not taking a quiz after this. We just need them to understand the steps and the basic gist of why. If they want the details in granular form, they have the internet and a whole nother library of books that they can study Java and they can study hard drives. And if they want to get to that level, you can buy a book this thick just, in that time, just on Java, right? Because we were going off onto a whole side note on explaining what Java was. And after about 4 pages, I said, what are we doing? Nobody cares. If you care that much, good. There's another book for that. But for everybody else, keep reading. Don't worry about it. Here's all you need to know. Here's what it is. Here's the pros and cons. Here's what it does. That's it. If you want to know why and you want to understand that level of granularity, that's not a For Dummies book anymore. That's an educational, academic manual. And to the best of my knowledge, there's never been another book in tech written like that. The closest I've ever saw was what inspired me was a gentleman named Steve Bass. And Steve has been a guest on the show, and he worked as an author for PC World magazine. And I liked his conversational tone. He did not write in an academic tone. He wrote like he was talking to a friend, and it was all very plain English and easy to understand. That impresses me more than the technical accuracy of dotting every I and crossing every T. As long as we're conveying the concept, that's the important part for 90% of the users out there, or 90% of the people seeking the info. The technical-minded engineering type makes up a very tiny percentage, and they want to argue over the tiniest tech minutia. I won't participate in that game. I have no interest in it. What I also won't participate in are people that repeat information without verifying the information. That's frustrating to me because they propagate false information based on conjecture, and they're just lazy, too lazy to just verify what you're reading is true. Post a link to it. If what you believe to be true and you're going to make a bold statement without asking questions and you're going to say, this is the way it is, provide a link from an official source that backs up what you're saying, or don't say it. It's really easy. But what ends up happening in my line of work is now I have all this correction to do. Customers screw up their machines because they followed bad advice. I was told that, this person said this person said that. They should have been asking questions instead of making statements. And if you're going to make a statement, provide a link to prove what you're saying is true. If you're seeing statements made online about anyone or anything that are making bold claims, just like in a courtroom, show me your evidence. Where did this information, it just fell out of the sky? You must have got this information. Where did you get it from? Oh, I got it from somebody else. Well, where did they get it from? They got it from somebody else. Where's the source? For all we know, this is like the pass it on game, at school. Susie's only wearing one sock. Pass it on. Susie's wearing 2 different color socks. Pass it on. By the end of the day, Susie's got no underpants on. It doesn't work. You need citations. And, in a courtroom in the United States, you're not going to have a court case if you don't have citations and evidence. Your conjecture and hearsay are not going to win a case. So if you don't demand it as a person consuming information online, if you don't demand the evidence, then you get the information you're willing to accept. If you accept that what you're reading is true without any evidence, and then you have the guts to then republish that information and share that information with other people, you are just being toxic to your entire community. That's my opinion. You would be better off saying nothing than potentially causing lots of misunderstanding, harming people's reputations, or even causing unknown damage to others you don't know because you read something from somebody else you don't know and you didn't verify it before you propagated it. That's the same mentality as pitchforks and torches. It's that gang-like mentality. I hope the community here is self-aware of that and will not join the pitchfork community. So we're not going to change the world, but at least we can have some sense of sanity and respect and courtesy and common decorum that we all share amongst ourselves. I wouldn't do it to you. I wouldn't want you to do it to me. And I'm sure you wouldn't want somebody else to do it to you if you were the one they were talking about and they were just making up stuff. So how do we know if they're making up stuff unless we have evidence, official sources of information provided by links? If they're not providing that, it's probably because they're making it up. That's what I found in my years. The people who make claims without providing the links are making that information up, or they cannot explain it. Like, how do you know that? Well, I read it somewhere. Okay, no. You should completely dismiss anything they said of any value. But if you don't, that's on you. I'm just saying, it's up to each one of us to verify the value and quality of the information we're seeing online, especially as AI starts getting more and more popular. This skill is going to become very valuable in the coming years. You watch. Just looking back in the chat here before we get started. John Paul Bacon mentions RAID isn't just about faster speeds. It can also be about greater capacity. Absolutely, but at a slower speed. However, my argument would be we shouldn't be looking to add, in my opinion, if you were my customer, I would not be advising this old, what I think is an outdated and obsolete thought process of putting storage in your computer to an expanse of making your computer this one source of all your information. You basically have one point of failure, and if you want that much storage, you should go to a network attached storage device or use a cloud service, in my opinion, rather than trying to jam as many drives as you can in your computer. The point of failure that you're creating and the amount of devastation and complete catastrophe that you're inviting in that mindset made sense when there wasn't much choice. But these days, it doesn't really make any sense to put important data on your computer anymore as your sole library. It makes sense to have your library somewhere else, and then you are not leashed to your computer. One of the things that I started doing for all of my clients, started doing this about 10 years ago. Every computer in the office is the same. Every single computer, even if it's got a different chip in it, it's all configured with the same operating system and the same software. Anything that is unique, there may be like an accounting piece of software that's on one computer. That's only one piece of software that would have to be reinstalled. So here's how this works. Customer calls and says, my computer, fill in the blank. Blue screens, doesn't work, won't turn on, won't start, whatever the problem is. I've got work to do. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I just started my day. This is what I came into. I need you here at the office to fix this now. No. I can't stop everything I'm doing and get over an hour across town. In the meantime, you're down for that whole hour I'm traveling. And I can't procrastinate or put off a scheduled client I already had before you called. So what we do that makes sense is that employee will either grab a computer that's from another office or temporarily for the day, go sit in the other office. All the applications are the same. All the data is stored on the large capacity NAS. The NAS is backed up out of the building on a regular basis. So if anything should happen like fires, thefts, floods, viruses, ransomware, whatever, we always have an offsite backup. Employees can sit at any desk at any time, and nobody has a better computer than anybody else. So there's no office drama regarding how come her computer's faster than my computer. None of that. They're all the same. So if the inconvenience is you need to go sit at another station for the day, or the inconvenience is you need to move the computer into your office, after business hours, when everybody's gone home, when traffic and the heat have died off in Phoenix, I'll come down to the office and I'll fix it without any of the pressure and without interfering with office productivity. Worst case scenario, I take that computer back here to the office and I just let them use the spare machine, and I get it fixed here on my time, and then I bring it back and swap them back where they were. That is the smoothest process you could ever hope for. All the anxiety and all the stress, lost productivity, all goes away. Everything is operation as normal. But there's still people that are jamming 5 and 6 hard drives in this one tower computer, and they give themselves such high blood pressure and anxiety every time something goes wrong. And the idea that, first of all, mechanical hard drives are not reliable. Every mechanical hard drive you add is another point of failure. So if you keep adding more and more points of failure because you don't want to throw anything out, you're like, oh, this is still fine, I'll use it. You're adding more and more stress that you're going to have to deal with as each one fails one by one, depending on how old they are and how much life they have left into them. And if you want to set yourself up for that, don't let me get in your way. But I won't support you. If you're my customer, you won't be my customer anymore. You might have time for that nonsense. I don't. If you want to take those drives and move them externally into a dock so you can plug them in and unplug them as they fail or as you need them, that's much better on your electricity bill. It's much better on the drives. It's much better on your stress. And better yet, if you've got that much data, move them into a dedicated network attached storage unit. But stop storing it in the PC. Just keep your daily essentials in there. Anything that's important that's not a daily essential should be at very least backed up regularly. All of these disasters and catastrophes where people cry and whine about my computer's doing this and my computer's doing that, in my experience, have created this very problem. My customers don't have these problems and haven't had these problems in 10 years, or at least none that, in the sense that it's interfering with productivity. We simply swap the computer out, they're right back in business in however long that takes, 10 minutes. And they continue about their day, their customers continue to get helped. We're not going to hold on to old hardware because it's still working. No. And remember, I'm a working technician, so we're not setting any customers up with RAID 1 or RAID 0 internally into their computer. We don't do it. Can I help you?
Yes. Can you mute for a second?
So Mars just told me some of you were having some issues with the live stream crashing the browser. There's nothing we can do about it. We broadcast the same every day, so our internet is good. My connection has 0 drop frames. We have a perfect solid connection to the YouTube ingest servers. I'm sorry to hear that there's difficulties that some people are having watching the live stream. I don't know why that's happening, and it's not within our control to fix it. So if you're finding it difficult, I would suggest you lower your resolution or come back and watch the video after it's live. It may be something that YouTube is working on. It may be something your ISP is working on. I don't know what's causing the problem, but I know it's not us, and I know that there's nothing we can do to fix it. So you can either, I mean, we appreciate you letting us know, but in this case, it's not on us. So if we learn more about what's causing these crashes, we'll certainly share the information with you. But what we do know is it's nothing on our side. YouTube ingest servers are very happy with our connection. So somewhere between YouTube and you guys, something's happening now, whether that's a browser issue, a bandwidth issue. I don't know. I'm sorry to hear it's happening. We certainly want you to have a good experience here, but it's sort of like I'm driving in the car and you're like, everybody around us is driving like crazy. I can't control how everybody around us is driving. I'm driving fine, my car's fine. So I would do something if there was something for me to do, but unfortunately, just so you know, there's nothing I can do about this. If you want to report it to YouTube, that would be the people to talk to. Jack Kugelmis says he's got no problems with the live stream using Edge. Well, typically, the people that are having the problems are the one we're going to hear from, and the people who aren't are generally silent. It's always a silent majority, but apparently there's been enough brought to Mara's attention that she wanted me to mute for a second to let me know what's going on behind the scenes. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate knowing, but I can't do anything. It's not within our, if I could go to YouTube and fix it for them, I would, but I've made this offer several times and they don't respond to me for some reason. Let's see. If any of you are watching that have a discrete graphics card, like you have a modern day 4090, I don't know, 40 series, 30 series, 20 series, and you're experiencing these crashes, I would strongly, strongly recommend that you turn above 4G encoding on in your BIOS and make sure to enable rebar sizing. And that'll enable your video card RAM to be utilized. And that can really improve your system performance and reduce these kind of errors that happen when resources are consumed to the max. This gives you more resources, and all you have to do is turn it on in your BIOS. And if you haven't done that, you're missing out on performance. But only if you have what would be a 20 series NVIDIA card or greater. I'm not sure on the Radeon side. You could certainly try it. Now, if you have built-in video, then this doesn't apply to you. This is just for people using discrete graphics cards that are relatively modern. And of course, if you want to learn more about that, you've got the YouTube search and Google search so that we can continue on with today's subject matter. Mark Gaines said he has no problems with the stream on his Android tablet. Okay, so I appreciate the information you guys are providing regarding your memory usage, that you're not seeing this on other live streams. There is nothing specific that we can change on our end that could cause this. In other words, when we upload to YouTube, YouTube processes our video and makes it available to you. What servers that my data has to flow through, depending on where you are in the world, will vary from each viewer. So if you're in Vermont and somebody else is in England and someone else is in Norway, you have to understand the route the data is taking is different for each one of you. So depending on that route, if there's anything in that route that isn't optimized, when you're watching another live stream that's taking in a totally different route from my live stream, from their endpoint to your endpoint. So I don't know that you can assert necessarily that the live stream itself is the problem when it may be true for you, but it may not be true for other people because it's a totally different route. It's sort of like getting on the road to go somewhere will depend on where you're going from, how you're getting there, and of course the condition of the roads and traffic and weather at the time. So unfortunately, on our side, we can't ask for a better stream. Our side shows 100% connection. It is not possible for this connection to get any better than it is now from our side. So what YouTube does with it once we give it to them, I have no idea. They have magic sticks they wave in the air and then it appears on your screen for all I know. Okay, so where was I? Now, Mark Gaines is wondering if the rebar resizing is available on the Radeon 7700. I don't work with Radeon graphics cards. We do have a Radeon graphics card, a mobile one, built into this mini PC. but I don't sell them. I only sell NVIDIA graphics cards, and even then, I don't really sell graphics cards anymore. They're, when a 4090 is $2,000, there's just not much in the way of staying in business. You don't have too many buyers that are willing to shell that out. So all I can tell you is you have Google search available to you, and if you're interested in rebar, what's it called? Bar resizing or rebar size, Google it, and it can tell you if that's affected. Now, you should be able, if it's an option in your BIOS, to turn it on. And if it doesn't seem to make any difference for you, go back into the BIOS and turn it off. You're not risking anything by trying. I want to emphasize to you to have experiences and stop looking for reassurances. I'm going to point you down a path, and you want to know what's at the end of the path. I'm going to tell you, go look. Why don't you tell me? Because I want you to go down the path by yourself. When you get down there, if you have any questions or you need any help, let me know. But until then, please have your experience. And if you need more information before you're willing to have that experience, Google's there for you. I encourage you to use it if you require that. Otherwise, follow the steps and let me know if it helps, or if you run into any issues. That's what we're here for. We're here to deal with real issues, not the imaginary ones. I hear a box.
You did get a box.
Is that a fractal design?
Yes, it is.
That wasn't supposed to arrive till next week.
Well, it came early.
Well, hallelujah. Something arrived early for once. All right. That's good news.
Yeah.
We have a build coming up for our friend Richard, a member of the channel, and he ordered a case and had it shipped to us, and unfortunately that was going to hold back the build by a week because Amazon said that case would not arrive here until the end of the month, another week to 10 days. So, all right, started planning other videos in the meantime, and as we were talking, it just showed up. Okay, I'll take it. I'm not complaining. Sooner's better. We're waiting on one more part to arrive, which should be here later today, and then maybe that'll be our build video for tomorrow. There you go. I got tomorrow's video already figured out now. Thank you, Amazon. All right, so let's take a look. Resizable bar. That's what it's called. Yes, I kept calling it bar resizing, resizable bar. But you'll have to turn on in many BIOSes above 4G encoding first before the resizable bar option is available to turn on. In either case, whether you can use it or you can't, it shouldn't hurt anything to turn it on. And if you don't like it, just turn it back the other way. Let us know your experiences. Please let us know. But we encourage you to have the experience, then reach out with any concerns. Okay, so with that, we're what, an hour in, and we still haven't started this. So with this machine here, in order to do the testing I want to do, I can leave the drives in it just as they are and simply remove the RAID array so that we have two separate Gen 5 drives. One in a Gen 5 slot running at Gen 5 speeds, and one Gen 5 drive and a Gen 4 slot running at Gen 4 speeds, because that's all the slot can handle. Then we can run Crystal Disk Mark and see what the speed differences are and if those align accordingly. That's my plan for today. On top of that, I don't intend to keep two drives in it. I'm not going to waste an expensive Gen 5 drive in a Gen 4 slot, RAID or otherwise. So I will be pulling and probably leaving empty the second M.2 slot. As I mentioned, if you need room for data, I recommend an external USB drive or a NAS. You know, these external USB 4 drives are as fast as an internal Gen 3. There's no taking anything apart. You just plug it in. If anything happens to the unit, it won't turn on. You've got everything on your external drive safely disconnected. I can't imagine why anybody would want to fill both banks. But if you do, I hope you're making regular backups. The only reason I would fill both banks is if I could benefit from RAID 0, and I would absorb that risk in exchange for twice the speed. But we're actually only getting half the speed because one slot's Gen 4 and Gen 5 is twice as fast. So you're better off, in my opinion, if you want performance and you want reliability, you remove as many points of failure as possible and only keep what's necessary. The computers I build contain 8 parts. That's it. When somebody has a problem with a computer, if you just have 8 parts, I can diagnose that system every single time in under 10 minutes. I've had this debate with people over and over and over again. I'm like, there's only 8 parts. It shouldn't take you more than a minute per part. You've got power supply, motherboard, CPU, RAM, storage. What am I missing? Cooler? Anything else, I don't care about. I don't care about your sound card. I don't care about your network card. I don't care about your printer. I don't care about your keyboard or your mouse. None of that matters. I can diagnose, how many parts was that? 6 or 7. Motherboard, power supply, CPU, RAM, cooler. I feel like I'm forgetting something. 5 parts, that's 2 minutes to check each part. I can diagnose most systems with those 8 parts. Well, I suppose the case is a part, but I don't have to diagnose the case. That whole thing can be diagnosed under 10 minutes. I don't know why anybody would need more than 10 minutes. Now, we've had exceptions where the BIOS state screwed us up. We've had exceptions where something was right in front of me and I wasn't seeing it. But I'll take that challenge on anytime you want to challenge me. I can fix any computer in under 10 minutes. I can tell you, let me rephrase, I can diagnose it. I can tell you what's wrong with it in under 10 minutes. Once you take out everything else, all that stuff, disconnect all your LEDs, disconnect all the wires off the board, all you have is power and video. That's it. I can tell you exactly what's wrong with that system in under 10 minutes. Every single time. Sometimes I have a bad day, but if I'm on my game, that's really no big deal. But the minute you add 6 hard drives and you just slam a bunch of stuff in there and cables are half on or not on all the way or in the wrong place, or you're putting old equipment with new equipment, so you've got old hard drives you're carrying over from your old build into your new build, I guarantee you the very first problem you will encounter will be the failure of the oldest parts first. Statistically speaking, you are setting yourself up for a failure. If we reduce the number of parts we have, we reduce the number of failures that are possible. And that's why I can promote things like 8-year builds in 8 years as a minimum, because if you keep it super simple, it will be reliable, it will be fast, and it will last you for years and years and be a much better value. But if you insist on carrying old equipment over that's long obsolete, you are free to do so on your own. Don't drag me along with you down that trip, because I don't want to go. The amount of time you will spend diagnosing in frustration is far greater value to me than just using the drive externally in a dock or so. You can still use it, just don't put it in the system. Hey, you know what? These old tires on this old car are still fine. Let me put them on the brand new car I bought. Gee, I wonder what my first failure is going to be on my brand new car. Well, there's nothing wrong with those tires. I'm going to keep them. Okay, you do you. I don't run my business like that. So what I need to do at this point is give us power again and erase the RAID array. And we're going to install Windows 11 just on one of the M.2s. And then the other M.2, once we're in Windows, we're going to wipe it clean and format it so it'll be just a data drive. And then we're going to run Crystal Disk Mark and compare the same exact drive is installed twice. One's in a fast slot, one's in a slow slot. Putting a fast drive in a slow slot, waste of money. So we ain't going to keep it that way, but I want to demonstrate it to you. See, these are things you can do. In this whole example I've been giving you, there's been one common theme. Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's a good idea or that you should. And if you choose to do it anyway, set your expectations. Don't be surprised. Be surprised if it works for years without a problem, because that would be unusual if you go against the advice. I should specify that. Did I leave the mouse plugged in? No, let's plug the mouse in. Yeah, quote me on it. If you want to quote me that I can diagnose a computer in under 10 minutes, once you bring it down to those 6 parts or however many parts it was, anything longer than 10 minutes or means I'm having a bad day. That's the bottom line. I had somebody who was working on a problem for hours, and he's like, you know, I said, try this and try that. And he's like, you know, I'm not an idiot. I go, look, you know what? We got to a point where I said, you're not listening. You want to argue? You've got your mind made up that you have a problem that doesn't make any sense. And you're trying to convince me it doesn't make any sense. But I promise you, once I have the information you're not telling me because you're not cooperating, it'll make sense. But if all I'm doing is relying on you, who has already convinced yourself it doesn't make sense, I'm never going to get the answer from you because you've already made up your mind and you're blind to what the answer is. So this is a waste of time to try and help you over the phone. Bring the machine to me. Let me get the machine. Let me put it in front of me without you poisoning my view and my attitude. And I can promise you I'll have it sorted in under 10 minutes. There's no way you could have, you want to bet? I'm like, I'm not going to bet you because I don't want you to lose your money. Just bring it over and I'll show you. And then I think I had it diagnosed in 6 minutes. And he's like, I cannot believe what I just saw. I'm like, it's always the same for me. This is another day at the office, man. I know what to tell you. You witnessed it. He goes, I will never doubt you again. I said, you shouldn't have doubted me to begin with, but whatever. All right, so let's start. We're going to turn this on. What am I missing? Well, the power button's up here. Now, when you have intermittent computer problems, when you have a computer that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, those are the difficult ones to solve, because if you have no way to replicate the problem, then how do you know if you solved it or not? So I should put that caveat in that, say you've got a computer that's not turning on, a computer that won't boot up, a computer that whatever the behavior is repeatable over and over and over again, those I should specify shouldn't require more than 10 minutes. But when it only sometimes does this or only sometimes does that, and I don't care if it's a health issue, sometimes it hurts when I do this. If it's sometimes my brakes squeak, you take it to the mechanic, it never squeaks for the mechanic, right? Intermittent problems are a different issue altogether. So I do need to add that one little exception. Intermittent problems are not fun for the tech, they're not fun for the end user, and they can take a very, very long time to figure out. Unless you can replicate the problem, you could never be sure that you fixed it. It's just the way it is. So yeah, just want to put that little condition in there. Probably should have started with that now that I think about it. Sometimes people have selective hearing and they didn't hear the exception part. So they'll remember back in 2024 when you said, and I go, yeah, remember when I also said, I didn't hear that part. No, of course you didn't. But yeah, let me go to camera 2. What are we doing over here? Oh, this is already booted up. So let me go full screen so I can see what's happening. So the first thing we need to do, I don't want to just clone this with Acronis because we have RAID drivers and RAID software that I don't want hanging around in the system. So we'll do a clean install. I don't want to have drivers on a clean install I'm not using. That can cause intermittent problems later. That would be fun. So hopefully we'll be able to get into the BIOS here, and we'll go to Setup, and we're going to erase our RAID array. So we're going to go to Advanced, and under RAID Expert Config, Array Management, we're going to delete the array. We have just this one array made up of 2 drives, and we hit Delete, Confirm, Yes, no arrays found, and then we want to turn NVMe off, NVMe RAID. You want to turn off NVMe RAID, so that's going to be under Advanced, and NVMe RAID mode will now be disabled. And now we're going to save and exit. So that should return the system back to essentially factory settings, and the drives will be reset, so the drives are effectively erased. Now it should boot to my Windows 11 installation media that I plugged in, because it can't boot to these drives anymore, and the only bootable device I've got plugged into it is the Windows 11 installation media. So when that shows up, Here it is. We'll hit next. We go through the standard procedure. We're not doing RAID this time, so we don't have to go through all that hassle we did before. And we are erasing these drives, okay? So just to be clear, everything's lost, gone forever. We accept the license agreement, and now it's going to look and see where we can install, and we should have a choice of the flash drive for some reason and the two M.2 drives. So drive 0 M.2 is 1.8 terabytes, and disk 1 is 1.8. I don't know which is which. I don't know which one is the Gen 5 drive or the Gen 5 slot. They're both Gen 5 drives. So I'm going to just assume disk 0 is the fast one. Disk 2, this is all our installation flash drive here. We obviously would never select that. So we're going to start with disk 0, and then once we install, then and only then will we be able to figure out what's going on with the which slot is which. I don't know if the Gen 5 is disk 0 or if the Gen 5 slot is disk 1. So you'll see there's an unknown type here. That means there's something left over from the RAID. So we need to delete the partition. It needs to say it's unallocated. So removing the array did not completely erase everything on the drives. We could have turned the array back on and the drives would have been okay, I guess. Either way, it's not a, you should have a backup for anything important. So we're going to delete the partitions on both disk 0 and disk 1 so they become an allocated space, which is how you're going to install any brand new drive. Out of the box, that's how it arrives, and that resets it back to factory settings. Then we'll hit next on disk 0 and let Windows 11 start to install. Again, this is Windows 11 24H2. Anytime you see me install Windows 11 since 24H2 came out, that's all I'm installing now. I still stand by 24H2 is way, way better than Windows 10 has ever been, and it's way better than Windows 11 has ever been. I really, really like this operating system, and for all the people that are saying they're having troubles, it's probably they have something unique most of us don't have. If you wait for the 24H2 update to come to you, it'll probably work. If you force it, there may be a reason why it hasn't been offered to you yet. But I can assure you, I have installed, well, yesterday after the show, I went over to Studio A and I put 24H2 on 3 more machines. And I put it on 2 machines at Studio A the day before that, the day before that, the day before that, the day before that. Plus all the machines we've done here, I've never seen it fail. It doesn't matter if it's AMD or Intel. Even on the Nuka-Cola build, the 8086K, do you remember that build we did all those years ago? It's still sitting at Studio A. Yesterday it updated to 24H2, no problems at all. Now there have been a bunch of BIOS updates. If I see another BIOS update, it'll be a day too soon. I have BIOS updated everything out of my mind. Even those Nook, what were those Nooks called? They were an i5 9300H. I've got like 4 of them. Oddly, they didn't have BIOS updates, and they all took 24H2 without a problem. Everything. The only machines I had problems with are the original Threadripper build. That's going to need a new Threadripper chip that's not Windows 11 compatible. And the first, the AMD build I did, the 2400G, any AMD that's Zen or Zen Plus is not going to be Windows 11 compatible, even though that chip's not even 6 years old. If it was an Intel chip that was 6 years old, you wouldn't have this problem, but it's a Generation 1 product, and as a result, these are the consequences of being first. We talked about all this. I think anybody resistant to Windows 11 is got some old software, obsolete software, or they just have a bad attitude, and I can't fix those things. But I can tell you, my personal opinion is I highly, highly recommend Windows 11 24H2 as an upgrade, being better than Windows 10. Not just a replacement, it's better. But that's just my opinion. Arnold Lindos with $15.77 in Super Chat says, hello, Carey and Mara and chat. I did not expect a Thursday show. Yeah, well, if everything would have gone well yesterday, we wouldn't be here doing this now. But it left as many questions as it gave us answers. So what we do know, and what we established on yesterday's show, is RAID 0, and again, in my opinion, for performance or storage capacity, makes no sense to me. Now, because we have these experiences together on a live and unscripted show, That also means you could come to your own conclusion very different. As long as if you're paying me to solve problems for you, I cannot accept that responsibility if you choose to not take my advice. But if you're not paying me to support you, in other words, you're going to go against my advice, you're certainly free to do that. But I also would not, like if you were my client and I told my client you need to do X, Y, and Z and they refuse to do it, then I can't afford to keep them as a client. They could put me out of business. So I have to separate terms with that client and say, look, there's no point in me being here. If you know better than I do, you don't need me, and I can't absorb the liability. There's a reason I'm able to keep my business alive for the last 30 years. We follow these procedures that ensure that I'll have a business tomorrow. You may not care if I have a business tomorrow, but I do. So if a customer puts me into a liability situation, they're not going to be my customer anymore. But you as a viewer, you weren't my customer to begin with, right? I mean, all of my members, I still will support you just as I do my paying customers. And if you have any problems, I'm always happy to help you. But I just want to say, a lot of problems, if you follow my advice, a lot of problems could be completely avoided, but then you'd never know. If you never had the problem to begin with, how would you know it was because of my advice? This is a very difficult place for me to be. Because if the problem happened, you say, well, it would have happened anyway. And if the problem doesn't happen, you'd say, well, it wouldn't have happened anyway. So it's a very difficult thing for me to prove other than by looking at the history of my business. Not too many computer shops have been around over 30 years. And there's got to be a difference between us, you know? So that's what works for me. That's what's proven to work. Historically, if you don't believe me, the business has been around and that history is verifiable. However, so sometimes we need to learn things on our own, and I respect that too. Sometimes there's a skepticism that says, you know, I want to have the failure, I want to have the experience. So be it. Like I said, if it has no financial impact on me, doesn't bother me none, you know. But when a client sues you for their financial losses because they did something you advised them not to do, and then they're going to take you to court and hold you accountable for it, not a good place to be. Just, it's a subject matter you don't see much here on YouTube because most of the content creation in the tech sector is being done by enthusiasts who they're not held accountable to anything they do. That's why I'm such a fan of folks like Mike's unboxing reviews and how-to channel, live Windows training with Doug Betts, Salem Techsperts, where you're seeing actual repair people, and you'll notice the caution, and you'll notice how far ahead they think. They're not just thinking about how to solve this problem right now. They're thinking about, how do I make sure this problem goes away forever and I have a happy customer who's going to refer me and come back for more business and also isn't going to sue me. And also, I need to get this done yesterday. So I would love to see a lot more of that here on YouTube. The enthusiasts are fine for what they are, but there's just, in my opinion, not a balance of actual technical people doing this for a living to offset the practical side of things. And that's just a general statement. There's always exceptions. All right, so now we've got our Windows 11 installed, and if we go to disk management, we should see the other drive should pop up here. It says unallocated, so let's format that. So these are both the same Generation 5 drives. One's in a Gen 5 slot, one's in a Gen 4 slot. I don't know which is which right now. But we're going to find out by running Crystal Disk Mark, and we can tell from the performance numbers which slot is which. If the performance is higher on disk 1, then that's going to be our Gen 5 slot. I don't know, based on the vertical and horizontal arrangements, which one is disk 0. This is the only way I can tell. So we'll let that format. I'm going to go ahead and unplug my Windows 11 installation media, because the next thing I need to do is get this online so that we can get all the drivers we need for it. Oh, you know what? I did download the drivers, didn't I? You know what? let me plug in the flash drive we had yesterday that has our downloaded drivers. And let's just grab them that way. Why not? So it was this file, as I recall. We'll pull that out here. That's all formatted. We're ready to go. You see down here, we're not connected to the network. We have a bunch of devices, including our network driver, that are not loaded. So these devices here, and that's what the driver download is for. So if we go to the file there that we just copied over from the flash drive, let me move that so I can see it. Double click, extract all. And you can go through this alphabetically. You could go through this a number of different ways. We learned yesterday we have the MikroTik Wi-Fi, not the Intel Wi-Fi. They give you drivers for both because apparently it could come either way depending on the model you order and when it was made. You know, what do you do if you're a factory and you cannot get one manufacturer's product? Do you just stop production, or do you have a substitute? I suspect that a substitution or a fallback is available for that reason. So now we'll use these extracted drivers. We can start with the AMD chipset software. We're going to run that. And that's going to resolve some of the issues in our device manager just by itself. And so I don't confuse myself, I'll delete the zip file. We don't need that anymore. We've got it already decompressed here. And as I mentioned, we can just go through these one at a time and get through them. And that will get our drivers back installed. And then we can go ahead and run our crystal disk mark numbers and determine if disk 0 or disk 1. We know physically the Gen5 slot is the one that shares the screw that holds down the Wi-Fi adapter. What we don't know is that disk 0 or disk 1. And because both drives are the same make and model, I can't tell by looking in the BIOS because they both, disk 0 and disk 1 are the same make and model, same capacity. So it does make things a little confusing. So where you want the same make and model in a RAID 0, you don't necessarily want the same make and model installed at the same time. Ideally, you only have one drive installed when you install Windows. That way you always install to the right drive. So if I would have taken the other drive out, knowing which drive was this, or which slot rather, was the Gen 5 slot, that would have automatically become disk 0. See how that works? Then once I install Windows, I could shut it down, unplug it, and then add a second drive. Then when I turn it back on, that'll become disk 1. That's how that should work. But because I have to take 4 little screws out, remove a heatsink with a fan on it, I'd rather not do that. So for that reason, I'm just kind of being lazy. I'm being efficient. That's what it is. I'm being efficient by just leaving it in there, and we'll figure it out this way instead. So folks, still experiencing buffering. Again, we have a 100% solid connection to the YouTube ingest servers. We have 0 drop frames. It hasn't dropped a single frame. We probably could not have as far as I know, this is one of the best connections we've ever had. It can't be any better than it is. So on our side of things, just to reiterate, everything's perfect here and everything's perfect to YouTube. Between YouTube and you, I don't know what's going on. But again, I'm not quite sure what we can do about that. I have to be able to replicate the problem in order to isolate it. And if the problem is in somebody else's hands, like my internet service provider, then I have to rely on them. Or if it's YouTube, or if it's Google, or if it's some servers in your route to getting the data to you. You know, what can I do? Let me jump back to full screen, and we're going to go to the next driver, which is the graphics driver, I guess. Yeah, because this has a discrete graphics card in it, it loads the software separately. All right, let's see what else they're talking about in the chat room besides buffering. Luke Greenia said he just tried to watch a different live video and his browsers crashed there as well. Wow, it makes sense. Bajan Guy joins us, says good afternoon. And people on Windows 10 and Windows 11 are all experiencing these issues. So it's not a 24H2. I know people are hoping. There's just people that just don't want to accept how good 24H2 is. But no, this is not a 24H2 problem for sure. This has to do with the browser, or it has to do with the bandwidth being consumed in the route that the data is taking. That's the only thing that makes any sense. David Graham said some software is incompatible with 24H2 and different combos of control software. Most people who have software incompatible with 24H2 have out-of-date software or out-of-date hardware. That must be something quite old. If I were you, that's, well, speaking of a crash, we just got a crash on the video driver. If I were you, I would not blame 24H2. That's not a failure of 24H2. That's a failure of that particular software manufacturer or hardware manufacturer. So if you could tell us specifically what piece of software you're having a problem with, I can probably explain why you're having a problem with that. But an overall general statement that other people are having problems with some software or accommodations thereof is literally no information at all. That's just an excuse. But if you could be more specific, I'm sure we could help you. Now, let me go back to whatever that crash was. It might have been because these drivers are not for 24H2. Bear in mind that the drivers we downloaded from Minisforums are likely out of date. There's probably a newer AMD chipset driver and Radeon graphics driver. Now, we don't have Intel Bluetooth, but we do have Intel Ethernet, and we can grab that. And then, of course, once we're able to get back online, which this is what this should have done, then we can get the updated drivers, which I'm sure would resolve the blue screen issues. Old drivers with any Windows operating system in the history of Windows will cause your operating system to crash. That is true of Windows 11 today, as it's always been true of Windows 95 or Windows XP. Still the same rules apply for the same reasons. All right, we're going to get through that. That's going to put our Bluetooth driver, our Wi-Fi driver. Then we have a Realtek audio driver. We'll go ahead and throw that on, even though it's not entirely necessary. It's an unusual installation method. And then there's a Realtek app that we'll throw on here right quick. And that should be all our drivers with regards to our device manager. Now, with regards to the blue screen, as I mentioned, the two drivers that we definitely want to make sure we have up to date are going to be that AMD chipset driver and that AMD Radeon driver. In both cases, we can do that with the AMD Adrenalin software. And I recommend you keep this software updated at all times. This improves your system reliability and system performance, and oftentimes even your system security. So I'll just type in AMD Adrenalin, if I can spell it, Adrenalin, and then we're going to just hit this button here, and we're going to download the software, which should take us to the driver. Download software, download drivers. Then we'll open that up and apply it. This is absolutely critical. Just like your Intel chipset drivers, your operating system very heavily relies on these, and your experience is going to vary greatly on old drivers versus new ones. When it comes to video drivers, I don't care if it's a Radeon or a GeForce or an Intel graphics card, those video drivers are critical, and your chipset drivers are critical. You always want to make sure those are up to date. And if you're ever experiencing a crash, those are the first two places I would look if I were you. Video drivers, chipset drivers. Always make sure they're current. In the meantime, while that's loading, let me just take a look in our device manager and see if everything looks happy in there. So we have a multimedia controller here that's likely going to be resolved through this update, and also we'll do some Windows updates and we can run Crystal Disk Mark. There we go. Those are both the Radeon video driver and all the chipset drivers are all going to be installed now through the AMD Adrenalin software. That's why it's so important you make sure you keep this up to date. It affects the entire foundation upon which your operating system and all of your hardware rely on. Everything else is light work. This stuff is not to be skimped on. All right, let's go back over to the chat and see what you're talking about here. Paul Connolly says he's not buffering or crashing on his YouTube app on his phone or on his browser in Windows. Ron Barner says he won't be able to watch the live streams until we can find the problem. It's not for us to find the problem, and it's not for us to determine that these problems will continue on the next live stream. All I can tell you is whenever this problem mysteriously began, it will mysteriously go away, and we likely will never know the reason why, and nor can we expect it on every live stream just because you're experiencing it today. So just so you know, I understand if today is a difficult day for you to watch a live stream, join us tomorrow, see if the problem still exists. Join us on Monday, see if the problem still exists. Join us on Tuesday. I can almost reassure you that there are going to be days that are better than others when it's something we don't have control over, and we'll never really know when it's fixed because some people are still not experiencing any problems and other people are, and we don't have any control over the environment that you're in or the data provider that you're using or the servers and the routes they're going through. Eventually, it will be resolved, and that resolution could happen in 5 minutes or it could happen in 5 months. It's out of our hands. There's nothing we can do about it. But I wouldn't assume you wouldn't be able to watch live streams from now on. That's only accurate, apparently, for now. So you'll have to keep checking to determine. And of course, if we learn anything about it, we'll share it with you. But I don't think we're ever going to hear anything about this. Alan Lindos with a $2 super chat said his buffering has gone. Yeah, just as mysteriously as it started, it's likely going to end in a very similar mysterious way. That's what I would expect. Stuff like this, companies aren't really here to brag about. Typically, when Chrome crashes, it sends a report to Google. And so if this is happening to a lot of people watching YouTube live streams, then Google engineers are being flooded with Google Chrome crash reports. And since Google owns YouTube, those teams could be working on it now. That's why it asks you if you want to anonymously send the crash reports. So whether you choose to or not, there are plenty of people who never uncheck the box. And I can assure you, the engineers are being flooded with these messages. They're well aware of it. You don't have to report it. There's nothing else to do. All right, now with that finally done, let's hit our Windows update. Oops, I have to go full screen. Yeah, let's grab our Windows updates. And again, I like to turn this option on, and I like to turn on this one, and this one. And while that's doing the check, let's take a look in our device manager. Is everything happy now? Yes, that's what I suspected. Everything's good. We've got a few cumulative updates, and while we're waiting, we'll check our power plan just because I don't want this thing to go to sleep on me while we're live. So we're going to set sleep to never and turn the monitor off after 3 hours. Dodged a bullet there. And then I don't like this little advertising icon spam down here, so I just type in search permissions, and we're going to turn that off, get rid of it. In the meantime, oh, I don't like the hidden icons down here. We're going to right click on the taskbar settings. We're going to go turn this off and turn this off, and under other system tray icons, I turn the one on that's turn off the one that's on and turn on the ones that are off. Oh, Microsoft. You're so wacky. Windows updates are still running in the background. Even though I close the window, it doesn't stop them. So if I just want to keep an eye on it, I can just go back to settings and back to Windows Update, and we can see where it's at. These start button items I don't want, right click and uninstall. This is not bloatware, guys. These are just little shortcuts. Bloatware would take, you want to know what bloatware is? Get the McAfee uninstall tool. Download it for free. If you have any like McAfee Live Safe or any of this other McAfee stuff, it'll take 20 minutes to get all that McAfee stuff off your system. That's bloatware. This little tiny stuff, right click, uninstall, those are crumbs. Those aren't even cookies. Those are crumbs of cookies, nothing. It would take you longer to run a debloat script and download the debloat software than to simply right click and uninstall. Unless, of course, it's Norton or McAfee. The best tool they make is the uninstallation wizard for McAfee and for Norton. Norton makes a Norton uninstallation tool, and McAfee makes a McAfee removal tool. They're free, and they're the best products each company makes. Strongly recommend running them. Get that crap off your system, then talk to me about bloat. Because those are the two most bloated programs I'm aware of that are in common installation of consumer PCs. My clients don't run that stuff. Okay, so back over to the chat room. Phil Stodd said I went into the BIOS and enabled the above 4G, and now it seems fine using an XFX RX7600 GPU. I appreciate the update, Phil. It may be too early to tell. It shouldn't hurt anything by turning it on. It does help share the resources with the video memory on your video cards, so whether or not you notice an improvement, we'll have to tell over time, or whether or not you notice a performance improvement. That's for you to determine depending on how you use the machine, or whether you notice nothing at all, but it shouldn't hurt anything. So we'll keep an eye on it. We're off to a good start anyway, so I appreciate the update. And while that is installing, I'm going to grab a cold Gatorade here. And it looks like we're going to end on time today based on what we're seeing, because after this string of updates, we should be able to go ahead and run our Crystal Disk Mark test on 0 and Disk 1 and finally get some answers here. And then you can compare that to yesterday's Crystal Disk Mark results of the RAID 0, and it should confirm it's a waste of money to run that on 2 different generation drives. At least, again, for performance reasons. All right, that's ready to restart. It's a fast little machine, I will tell you. The AtomMan series from Minisforum is no joke. These are some powerful little boxes. It's amazing to me that these machines cost less than the CPU that we put in Threadripper and are like 3 to 4 times faster than it and use 1/4 of the power it uses. And they're Windows 11 compatible, where the Threadripper is not. Isn't that crazy? When we did the Threadripper fix for Serve the Home, that's a 3995WX. I think that's a $4,000 chip. This machine will probably run circles around that too, and it won't generate as much heat nor consume as much power. Of course, it also doesn't have the workhorse ability that Threadripper does, but we're not using it anyway. So if you have something you're not using, it's the same as not having it. Just saying. Why pay all that extra money if you don't have to, and then pay all the extra money to use it, to plug it in and, you know, have it sucking down all the electricity, when you could have a machine that's smaller, easier to work on, costs a fraction of the price in both ownership, maintenance, and electricity usage. So to each their own, but there's certainly businesses that need these workhorse machines for some pretty intense productivity.
but outside of a hobbyist playing around, doesn't really make practical sense for most people. But that's not for me to decide how you spend your money and your time. I just want you to be aware. There's more cost than just the price of the hardware. Cost of ownership is much, much higher on those real high-end machines. And I've got to say, on the AtomMan line, cost of ownership is not higher. So far as I can tell, they're the same reliability and identical power consumption to other mini PCs of this performance ratio, and smaller, quieter, and they cost less than building it yourself. I think the desktop's in trouble. All those Intel and AMD chip problems weren't issues on the mobile chips. They were only on the desktop chips. Ron Barnish says he opened 2 more live videos on YouTube, is buffering. So what I would do if I were Ron is I would probably unplug my modem and I would unplug my router, unless they're both the same device. And then I would let it sit for about 2 minutes. Then I would plug it back in, or plug them back in, modem first, router second. Give it 2 to 3 minutes to renegotiate with your internet service provider, and then once you're back online, see if it resolves your buffering problems. If you have anything else in your network, like a network switch, an access point, all of that should be powered off, left off for 2 minutes, and then powered back on again. This is required from time to time to clear out memory buffers. We've all had to do that. Some of us have to do it more often than others. Bajin Guy said, I'm seriously thinking about getting a mini PC for my local church. They're so inexpensive now. I can't see why not. So as soon as these updates are done, I think that's the end of, well, we'll check one more time, but I think that's all there is for Windows updates. Frankie B sent in a $5 super chat. Sorry, Frankie, just saw that. Thank you, my friend. Planet Cryos contributed $5 earlier in super chat. I missed that. He says the manual for this mini PC is downloadable. Is that a word? Yeah, that's a word. Not the best manual, however. Yeah, that's pretty much every manual ever, with few exceptions. That's why I don't waste my time with them. That's kind of par for the course these days. Even when the manuals are good, people don't know because they won't read them. There's plenty of brand new car manuals sitting in glove boxes on brand new cars that owners have never even opened, even just to flip through the pages. They're brand new. Go look at a used car and you'll probably find a brand new unused owner's manual still wrapped in the glove box. People don't read them. And quite frankly, it's like 400 pages long with all the technology. They wouldn't understand it anyway. All right, one more shot with our Windows updates here. But I think that should catch us up. And then you always want to check under advanced options and see if you have any optional updates. If you do, I'd recommend you grab all of them. Universally, just grab them all. They're there for a reason. So it looks like the cumulative update failed before, so it's going to do that one more time. That might have happened because one of the other updates needed to take effect first. That's pretty common. But if it fails over and over again, that's a different story. So anytime you have a failed update, that's normal. It's a number of reasons why they're supposed to fail. You restart the computer, you try the update again, and you shouldn't see that failure ever again. If you see it again, and you want some help, let us know which update you're having the trouble with and when the problem started, and I'm sure we can help you resolve that. It's very uncommon now. The Windows update process in Windows 11 24H2 is much, much faster, and the downloads are smaller. And I posted about that. I think I posted it on my Twitter page. I might have posted it on my Facebook page. It's a great article on how the servicing stack has been vastly improved on 24H2. There's a lot of benefits under the hood that make the operating system better for gaming, that make the operating system better for updating. It's, you know, I sound like a Microsoft shill. And I've never, well, I wouldn't say never. I was pretty excited about Windows 95, but I wasn't making videos back then. But I sold the heck out of it. And I sold the heck out of AMD Athlon XP processors. Man, I sold a lot of those. You'd think I was working for the company. But things change. The only thing that I don't want to change is the state of my business being operable. Let me get rid of this flash drive. I don't need it installed anymore. That's our drivers. Let me unplug that. And then, yeah, these cumulative updates, they can take a while. That's normal. But the download should be smaller, and the amount of time it takes should be faster on 24H2 overall with Windows updates in general. And with that, when we restart, I can grab my utilities flash drive, which I have here. And I guess while we're waiting, I can just start copying what we need off of here. We can multitask, can't we? So we're going to grab, I'll go Carey's Windows 10 Optimizer. I always like to put VLC on there. Oops, if I drag it out properly. And for PC testing, I always grab CPU-Z, a Crystal Disk Portable. I think that's all we need. And those are all free programs, you know, VLC, CPU-Z, and Crystal Disk Mark. I always download the portable zip file versions. I don't install them ever. And they're all free, just Google them. And you can get them the same place I did. I'm not allowed to distribute them. They're not mine to give away. But you're welcome to go get it on your own if you want to run these same benchmarks on your system. And then I can unplug the utilities flash drive. We're done with that. Just checking the phone. Doesn't look like I'm missing anything there, so we're caught up, I think. We got about 15 minutes left of today's live stream. It looks like this update has failed. Did exactly what I said is highly unlikely, which is failing twice in a row after a reboot. So I'm going to try that one more time here. And if it continues to struggle, I'm going to just postpone that so we can get on with our test. And I can look into what this is if we have time afterwards or after the show later. This is the first time I have seen this experience. And of course, that would happen on a live show. But that's good. That proves everything's unscripted and unrehearsed and everything you see is real. Even when it does something that's uncommon, it doesn't mean when I tell you that these things are unlikely that they're not possible. It just means the likelihood of it is significantly reduced by comparing to what we're used to or what was considered normal. So let's see if it fails this third time, and if so, I won't waste any more time with it because we're running out of time here. It says it's installing. This time I'm going to watch it. Let's see how far it gets. I have not been paying attention, so I don't know what it was doing before. I don't normally pay attention to Windows updates. I set them and go about doing something else. It's so uncommon for something like this, especially now. I've got other things to do, and if there's a consequence, I'll be made aware of it, you know. I don't need to know right when it happens. So far, 17% is good. Where is our failure? We're talking about KB5044384. Yeah, so that's happening early on. We'll look into that and come back to it. In the meantime, we're good to go as far as our testing is concerned. So let me just bring these over here. Whoops. Let me bring these over here. Rox can see them. Bring that over here. Bring that over here. And you can see stuff like that is nothing to get worked up about. It's not a big deal. We'll fix it later, whatever it is. And then let's run Crystal Disk Mark on drive C and get our performance numbers. Now, knowing the drives, this is why this test is so important. Drive C and drive D are the exact same make, model, capacity. Now, if you remember, when we were in RAID 0 mode, does anybody remember what our read speeds were? I'm going to tell you right now, our read speeds were pretty much identical or slower than what you see with a single Gen 5 drive. Now the write speeds were showing 22,000, which did not make any sense to me because that should not have been possible. But on a Gen 5 drive, especially a quality one, speeds of 12,500 are pretty much where we're at today. Speeds up to 15,000 may be possible in future generations. Probably not quite to 15 because there's overhead with parity. Probably looking around 14, maybe a little over 14, but the technology's not there yet. But as far as Gen 4 and Gen 3, we've already saturated the bus. We flood them with as much as they can carry. That's why Gen 5 exists. And then eventually we'll flood Gen 5 with as much as it can carry, and there'll be Gen 6. And each generation doubles. So when we're looking at an average of 3,600 actual megabytes per second on Gen 3 when it's totally saturated, it's about 7,300, slightly more than double on Gen 4. And if we double that again with Gen 5, you should be around 14,500, right in that ballpark. But the technology has not caught up yet. The controller chips and the DRAM is not fast enough to totally saturate Gen 5, but it will be. And then there'll be a Gen 6. And Gen 6 will be twice again. So if we can do 14,000, then we'll be able to do 28,000. Assuming we have chips fast enough to go that fast, that's what it would take to saturate the bus. And then Gen 7, well, you can do the math, right? Now, as we finish on the read side of our specs here, what I'm particularly interested in is what our write speed sequentially will be on the top right. That should be close to the read speed, maybe 1,000 or 2 less. Should be 10,000 or better anyway. We'll find out here in a moment. That suggests to me, just by looking at this, that disk 0 is in fact our Gen 5 slot. Oh, those write speeds are better than I expected. So if we were in 2 Gen 5 slots with 2 Gen 5 drives in RAID 0, then our numbers should be twice what you're seeing. We should see somewhere around 24,000 on the reads and around 22,000 on the writes. And that's not what our experience was because the slots are not the same, even though the drives are. If I get a Ferrari and I get it in the slow lane on the freeway, it doesn't matter how fast my Ferrari is. I cannot go any faster than the car in front of me. It's kind of the same thing here. The fact that Minisforum has decided to make one Gen 4 and one Gen 5, I understand why they did that. But why they're offering a RAID configuration makes no sense to me. On a high-performance computer where everything's about performance, the idea that you would want it for storage just doesn't make sense to me. typically storage computers are built differently with a different emphasis on capacity and price to performance, for price to capacity versus price to performance. As a gaming machine, this was built to be a high performer. It wasn't designed to be a network attached storage unit. That doesn't mean you can't use it as such. It's just not what it was engineered on paper to be. As a result, with that logic, that doesn't make any sense to have mismatched RAID 0. But that's the way I see it. You may choose to see it differently. I will not be using RAID on this computer because of the mismatched M.2s. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Put your data on a USB drive or get a network attached storage. Save your money. Save the headaches of all that complicated setup. Not to mention the complicated maintenance when things go wrong. So this is disk 0. We're just now wrapped up. Let's do save results here as, we'll say this is Crystal disk mark drive 0 Gen 5. We'll make this a JPEG image. And we're going to save that right here on our desktop. Perfect. Now let's drop to drive D. Again, same, oh, it's drive F, probably because of my flash drive. So drive F is the second Gen 5 drive that's installed in the Gen 4 slot. We should see somewhere in the 7,000 range on these, which means we're wasting our money putting a Gen 5 in there. Let's see if that's true. We're going to run the same tests now on the other slot. I fully expect 7,300 in here. See, this isn't right. That is also Gen 5 speeds. So what's throwing me and what doesn't make any sense to me is how Minisforum has implemented the Gen 5 and Gen 4. It's quite possible that you have to use both drives at the same time in order to see the performance degradation of one drive to the other. Because we're still seeing Gen 5 performance on drive F. We shouldn't be. We should be seeing Gen 4 performance. Is it possible that it's auto switching internally to Gen 5 mode to each slot? Because that's what it appears to be doing. But that if you tried to run both of them at the same time, you'd still be limited to the same speed. It basically, each drive would do half. Because that's the only thing that explains this oddity. Because now I can't tell which one's drive 1 and which one's drive 0 if they're both performing at Gen 5 speeds. Something's not adding up here. And what's probably going to happen is I'll have to take this information to Minisforum and ask them to explain it to me. Their documentation suggests that one slot is Gen 4, but we are seeing Gen 5 on both sides.
I don't even know what to say.
My guess is that you can only run Gen 5 on one drive at a time. But that's not how they promoted it. Because if this were truly both Gen 5, we would have seen 24,000 on our reads yesterday.
Right.
We were seeing the same reads in RAID 0 yesterday as we're seeing today. If anything, these numbers are a little better.
True.
RAID 0 actually slowed us down.
True.
But we did see 22,000 on the writes, which didn't make any sense either. Because that would be the number you should see in a RAID 0 if both slots were Gen 5
Right.
with Gen 5 drives. Yeah, we're running Gen 5 on this all the way. I am baffled. So now I'm wondering, is there a way that we can test both drives at the same time? Can I run 2 instances of Crystal Disk Mark, or do I get another benchmark so I can run the 2 benchmarks at the same time and see if both drives are... In other words, there's so much... Think of a canal, and we've got 2 rivers. And one river can run down the canal at a certain gallons per minute, and the other river can run down the canal at a certain gallons per minute. But if we open both rivers at the same time into the canal, do we flood the canal Do we maximize how many gallons per minute the canal can hold?
Right.
Or is it still the same number, but each river is now delivering half as much?
Right.
That's weird. These numbers, this should not be happening
Right.
based on the documentation.
Yeah.
We should be getting Gen 4 speeds out of one of these
That's why I
drives.
had to walk over here. I was like, what
One of these-
is happening here?
If one of these slots is truly Gen 4, why are the numbers twice that of Gen 4 on both slots?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. So there's a piece
Try it.
here.
Let's try it.
Well, I'm trying to wonder, I don't know that I can run this on two drives at the same. I could run like the ATTO benchmark on one drive, and then I don't know if it'll let me open two instances of Crystal Disk Mark or not. I could try. Let's let this test finish, and I'm going to save the results. All right, that's first. And just to give you some comparison, these were our numbers from before, and they're virtually identical. They're exactly identical. That is weird. Drive C, this is drive F. One says 1862 gigs, one says 1863. I'm not sure why that discrepancy is there. Those should also be the same. I'm going to save this image, and we'll save it as a JPEG. And we're going to go to drive 1. I wonder if I bring up Crystal Disk Mark again, will it, if I hold down Shift and double click it, will it open again? Whoops, no. Will it open a second instance of it? It does. All right. So this one's on drive C, this one's on drive F. Let's hit all and run both tests at the same time. Now, will both drives run at the same speed, or will both drives run at half speed? That drive says it's full speed, and that drive says it's full speed. This is very confusing. This should not be possible. Unless both slots are Gen 5. Okay. We will definitely take these results to Minisforum and ask for an explanation. If these are both running in Gen 5, then RAID 0 makes a lot more sense. But then the results from our RAID 0 test yesterday should have been the addition of these two numbers on our reads. So the 12375 plus 12377 added together, let's just call it 25,000. That should have been the results of our speed test yesterday. We did see a result of 22,000 on the right side of things, but not on the read side. Was that a driver-related problem? Is there inaccurate information in the manual? Are we doing something incorrectly? Are we misinterpreting the information we're seeing? So much like yesterday's show, we end up with more questions than answers. Now, if this has two Gen 5 slots, which it is certainly behaving like it is, that's a far greater value, and Minisforum is underselling it. Wow. Now, I would encourage you guys watching the video to run the same test on your computer. Crystal Disk Mark is free. Download the zip version, that's the portable version, and run the same test. If you don't know what these numbers mean, compare it to what you have, and then you'll have a reference point to understand just how impressive this is. John Paul Bacon says the NVMe driver might not support Gen 5 for both. Well, you're right, that's entirely possible. But according to Minisforum, this doesn't support Gen 5 on the other M.2 slot. But evidence, keep emphasizing over and over and over again how experience is far greater value than what anybody says or what anybody has written. So if you have an option to determine an experience on your own, or you've decided you're not going to experience something because of information you've received, how do you know the information you received is 100% accurate? How do you know the conditions or the bias that was put into the information? That's what concerns me. We've seen some errors on Minisforum's website where it mentions 64 gig maximum amount of memory on a machine that takes DDR5. But the machine takes SODIMM DDR5. I guarantee its maximum is 96. The 64 gig is a maximum for DDR4, and somebody at Minisforum didn't notice. Somebody at Minisforum said that one of the machines we looked at, the 760 Slim, had two 5 gig Ethernet ports when it only has one 2.5 gig Ethernet port. These are pretty big errors. And of course, we're making Minisforum aware, and they said they've hired on a bunch of people that are still being trained and they're making a lot of mistakes, and they appreciate us bringing it to their attention. But this appears to be another one of these misunderstandings or miscommunications internally with the company. This is not the first time they've delivered more than what they're selling. You know, when they tell you there's a 2 terabyte maximum storage limit, there's no such thing as a 2 terabyte storage limit on any NVMe computer ever built. It doesn't exist. Why would you tell your customers there's a limit? Why would you voluntarily impose something that's not true and theoretically reduce the value of the machine? Because if your competitors are stating the actual fact, which is there is no such thing as a limit, then your customer may choose your competitor over false information on your website. And Minisforum's got a great product. And as much as I liked this product before, I'm certainly liking it even better now because we just ran this test simultaneously on 2 different drives, and we are getting Gen 5 out of both of them. I am perplexed. So we're going to have to look more into this. And that does mean RAID 0 with the right drivers maybe should be able to achieve that 25,000 or 24,000 megabytes per second I was looking for. So I guess I'm not going to be removing these drives at the end of the day like I thought I was, because yeah, I need to work with Minisforum on this. We need to find out what's going on. Michael Lavelle said he ran on 2 drives and got his Gen 4 speeds. Ron Varnish says if we can't fix the buffering problem, we'll have to stop watching the live streams. Again, Ron, I don't know. It's like saying if we can't stop people from driving irresponsibly on the road, we're not going to be able to drive our car. I cannot control how other people drive on the roads. So I'm not quite sure how to respond to you in the chat room because it's not something we're causing and it's not something we can fix. So threatening to not watch the show anymore, it's not punishing me for doing something or not addressing the problem. It's not within my capability. I need you to understand this has nothing to do with us. But if there was anything we could do to help you, we certainly would. But this is not happening to everybody. And for all we know, this is a problem they're working on at YouTube and Google. I just don't know. So I'm not quite sure what else to tell you. Hang in there. Paul Howe says, it seems to be only people in the United States that are having problems. Well, it's quite, well, again, and I I don't know what else to say. It's not us. Our stream is going out perfectly. We've been on now for 2 hours and 5 minutes. I can show you my OBS screen. 0.0% drop frames. We have a stellar connection to YouTube. Ron Varnish says it's not just you. I understand, Ron, but it's not everybody. How many of you in the chat room, just to satisfy Ron's curiosity here, how many of you in the chat room are not having problems with today's stream? And where in the world, what continent are you on? I'd be kind of curious, even just for myself to have this information. Once again, you have a silent majority, and then you have a few people complaining and they think their complaint is more justified because someone else complained. But that doesn't make it true, right? Just because a handful of people are being affected doesn't justify that everybody's being affected. It's just, well, let me just look at the results in the chat room. John Paul Bacon said he's got no problems in the USA. Paul Howe says no problems. David Graham says no problems. He's in Illinois. Dave Batt says no problems. Paul Connolly mentioned the storms in the United States may have damaged some physical infrastructure used by internet service providers. This is a good point. That's entirely possible. Trevor Dunn said he's in Ireland and he is buffering. Frankie B said he's in New York. He's using the YouTube app and appears not to have any issues. Bradley Morris is not having issues in Central Illinois. So this is not limited to the United States at all. And now by comparison, well, here's Mark Gaines. He says, I'm in the UK. I'm having problems on my PC, but not on my Android. Interesting. 3D Everything says it's buffering every once in a while on a PC running Edge located in Northern California. Essential Working Too Hard said he fixed my problem. Connecticut. Jose Lopez says no problems in Kentucky. Michael Lavelle says no problems in Portland, Oregon. Okay, now by contrast, how many of you are having problems? Let's see which side is greater than the other. Appreciate your responses. Jose Lopez with a $1 super chat. Thank you, Jose. Thomas MacT is in St. Petersburg, Florida. No issues. Again, if you're having problems with the feed, with our live feed today, please let me know in the chat right now. I want to compare, for everybody's knowledge, the contrast between the number having problems and the number not having problems. Luke Greeny said the continuous buffering for him, but the chat room is perfect. Okay, Luke is in Vermont. Again, if you're having problems with the stream throughout today's stream, please let me know in the chat. I'm trying to gauge the percentage of people affected. Is it 10%? 100%? We know it's not 100%. And so far, we have two responses, Ron Varnish and Luke Greenia. Who else has had problems with the live feed today? Please let me know. You know, even if we're at a 50%, that would be a pretty serious problem, but I think it's very few people. So I'm just trying to gauge if this is a big problem or if it's a little problem. It's a little problem, meaning, is this affecting a single-digit percentage of viewers, or is this affecting the majority of viewers? Trevor Dunn said, Ireland iPhone YouTube app, no buffering on the same network. PC browsers are buffering. Interesting. Dustin Fuller said he had two problems watching us from Michigan. Very good. Essential Working Too Hard said I had it earlier. It was crashing on the live stream, but not buffering. Okay, that's 4 people. 4 people. Again, if you've had crashes during today's live stream, please let me know. I am trying to gauge how many people are actually affected by this. If you don't tell me, either way, I won't know if you won't tell me. Phil Stodd said he had a problem early on, but a BIOS change fixed it. Maybe too early to tell, Phil, but so far it seems like you're doing good. So let's hope that stays true. Time will tell. Okay, so let me go back over to camera 1. I think we're pretty much done. We still have that, whatever that update is that wants to retry. I'm going to revisit that a little later. In the meantime, I'm going to stop now because we're over time, and I'm going to reach out to Minisforum and try and get an answer on what's going on here. And then I'll let you know what they tell me. Quite often, I'm talking to marketing people, and then the marketing people have to take my questions to the engineers. And then when the engineers answer it, they respond back to the marketing people, and then the marketing people forward the response back on to me. So I wouldn't expect an answer very quickly. This process usually takes a few days, plus with the weekend approaching, we may not get an answer until next week. But we will pursue an answer and figure this out one way or the other. And of course, if you guys stumble upon any information that may explain this, please share it with us. Anything that can explain this will help me sleep. It doesn't make any sense. But our lack of knowledge is why it doesn't make sense. I guarantee you, once we fill in the gap of the information we're missing, all of this will make sense and we can explain it. It's not random, and it's consistent. It's not intermittent. It's always the same. We're missing some information. Paul Connolly says, thanks, Carey and Mara, for a great stream. Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks to the folks at Minisforum for putting up with me. Luke Greeny has said, I tried to watch another live feed and it's happening to them as well. There should be a way to report when you're on YouTube. You should be able to report a problem. See if we can maybe try that before we go. Let me just take a quick look where that is. On the 3 dots next to the video, you should see the option to report. And then you would report, no, this may not be the right one. This seems like reporting content, but we're reporting connection issues. So that, I know there's an option here to report the connection. I just have to find it. I think it's called feedback, I thought. I guess you would go into report and then you would choose other, or none of these are my issue, and hit next. It's going to ask for a timestamp and for you to describe the issue so you can let them know when your browser crashed at what timestamp. Again, that's mostly for reporting content issues. So I'm not sure where the feedback is for crashing. I know it's in here somewhere. We may have to do a special video on that to empower you guys to report this to Google and YouTube. The more people report it, the more attention it'll get. But your browser's probably, if you're using Chrome, reporting the crash to Google anyway. And if it's happening across YouTube live feeds in various areas, but not to everybody, there's certainly going to be enough crash reports that it'll bring it to the engineer's attention regardless. So that's my guess on it. I'm sure it'll just magically go away. By that meaning you won't change anything and I won't change anything, just the problem will go away just as oddly as the problem appeared, because it's not ours to fix. Trevor Dunn says the 3 buttons next to each message in the chat room has the option to report. I thought that report was for, once again, it's reporting content, what somebody has written. What we're looking for, I believe they call it feedback. Thanks again to our Super Chat contributors, Planet Cryos, Frankie B, Alan Lindos, and Jose Lopez. Thanks, you guys, for not only being members, but also those Super Chats as well. We did get a Core Ultra 7 ordered. The Ultra 9 never seems to have been made available for sale, as far as I can tell. Not yet, anyway. And honestly, it doesn't seem like it's worth $200 more for that. So we've got the Core Ultra 7 should be arriving tomorrow. The motherboard that we ordered probably won't arrive until the first week in November, but we should be able to get a build started or completed for our friend Richard, who wants a machine. And we just have to customize it to what he wants. And we're going to use the MSI Pro Z790P that we've purchased and built. We prepped it with a 14500 in order to emulate the voltage issues and heat issues. Of course, BIOS updates have fixed it. So what we'll do tomorrow is we're going to bring that prepped board back up here. There's probably a new BIOS. We'll update the BIOS again, or we'll check anyway. There's probably a new one. I think we're going to switch the stock cooler out to the laminar cooler. And we're going to pull the NVMe drive out because Richard has provided us a brand new S880 he would like us to use. And we'll install Windows 11 Pro, all the drivers and all the updates for Richard. Then we'll put that motherboard and power supply into a fractal design case that Richard wants. And I think that'll be tomorrow's build video. I hope you'll join us. We're live every single Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific time. We've had to reduce our chat to members only because of the issues of harassment that have started. It kind of comes and goes in like waves. We get a great public audience for a while, and then the public audience, the percentage of them become distracting and disrespectful. And so we have to turn the members only chat back on for a while. I apologize for the vast majority of our public viewers who are not members who cannot participate, but it's because the group you're in, you have members in that public group that are causing harm to your whole group. And really, there's nothing more I can do. Even, I see Doug Betts joining us. There's live Windows training with Doug Betts. And, Doug has had to turn on a prior approval for you to chat in his chat room. So even, it doesn't seem to matter now these days if the size of your channel. It's almost like the smaller your channel is, the easier of a target you become. And it's just the sign of the times that we're living in as people find form of entertainment in bullying others. And so the consequence to that means that all of the majority of people who are just fine, great folks, but who don't support us as members, unfortunately, they belong in the same category of the harassers. It's not their fault, but if you're going to be in that category, unfortunately, it'll affect your ability to communicate with us while we're live. We will probably go back to turning that on randomly in the future just to test the waters. If the harassment continues, we continue with members only for interaction. The videos are still free to watch. We're just trying to reduce the disruption. And of course, with just having members, we don't get disruptions. Members' disruptions are always welcome. Disruptions from the general public, that's babysitting, and I don't make enough money to do that. If I'm going to babysit, they're going to have to pay me babysitting money. So good to see you, Doug. Be sure and check out Doug's channel, Live Windows Training with Doug Betts. He does live interactive videos just like I do. He's a real working technician just like I am. Same is true with Mike's unboxing, reviews, and how-tos, and same is true with Salem Techsperts. I highly recommend them. I don't think Greg Salazar is a tech professionally, but he's a very good tech enthusiast. I don't know what his business background is, but he does very good work, and highly recommend his channel as well. As for the enthusiasts, they all do great stuff. If you're into the enthusiast side of things, I got no negative thing to say about them. It's just not what we do here. And they're already doing it, so why do we need to do what they're doing, So again, thank you to our friends at Acronis, 30% off for all of you guys. The discounts are in the video notes. Our friends at SCD Keys, taking PayPal now for your Windows Office, your Microsoft Office and your Windows product keys, fully 100% guaranteed. Legal, they're going to work. Everything has free trials. If you want to try it before you buy it, try Acronis. RoboForm, the password manager, These are all products I use. These are all products I recommend. These are where I get my product keys. I've asked these companies to offer you a discount. You should also know I've asked other companies to offer you a discount. And the reason why you don't see those companies listed is they said no. So even though I might use their product, I don't endorse it here. I might sell it or endorse it to a customer locally, but not to the worldwide public. Unless that company sees your value, we're not giving them free advertising. They need to offer you guys a discount. So the fact that you're not seeing a company in our list means they're not willing to cooperate. The fact that we have companies that do is where our focus should be. So if you're curious about Acronis, try it. It's free for you to try. Same with RoboForm. You decide if it's worthwhile to you. It's not a hard sell here. These are actual products I use in my real business, and these companies have agreed to offer you, the audience, my audience, a unique discount just for you guys. Same is true with SCD keys. Windows and Office keys, 100% legal, fraction of MSRP, and guaranteed. So if you run into any issues with any of the companies I endorse here, you let me know about it. Quite frankly, companies make mistakes, and when you reach out to customer service, every one of these companies will make it right. So always go that avenue first. And if that should fail, which almost never happens, unlike any other content creator, if I'm endorsing it, I back it up personally. I'm not aware of any other content creator that does that. So you let me know if there's any issue, and I guarantee you I will fix it one way or the other. The buck stops with me, or I wouldn't endorse their product if this was something that was making me look bad. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the longevity of the community. I want to make sure it's good for them. I want to make sure it's good for you. And I want to make sure it's good for me. And if it consistently drops any of those where one person is benefiting at the cost of somebody else, we don't associate with them anymore. Everything's got to be fair and reciprocal, or we don't deal with them. I have a very, very high standard. This is what I do in real life, and I do it exactly the same on YouTube, because as far as I'm concerned, YouTube is still real life, no matter how many people don't think it is. For me, it is. And of course, thanks to all of our members. I can't thank you guys enough for making these videos possible, for being a part of this community. I'm sorry to hear some of you have been having those buffering issues. I don't know what else I can do, unfortunately. If we learn more about it, or if you learn more about it, please let us know. It's just a mystery, as much of a mystery to us. It makes no more sense to us. And I suspect it'll probably just go away on its own. I don't know when. But if we learn anything other than that, we will certainly pass that information on and hope you will do the same. Thanks to Mara for all the work she does in the background, keeping us operating on the business side of things. And we will look forward to hopefully seeing all of you again tomorrow at 1 o'clock with our Build for Richard. Until next time, bye for now.